Your autonomy of choice on how you consume the news has never been more widespread or readily available than now, with an increasing number of Americans turning to news apps to consume their daily headlines and other forms of selected media. According to a recent Pew Research survey, it found that approximately one-third of Americans preferred the television when consuming the news of the day, at approximately 34%. Meanwhile, radio and print seem to be a dying age, with only 5% of Americans admitting that they still rely on that particular medium to get up to speed on what's happening around the world. The Pew Research Center also concluded that Americans have a wide range of options and digital platforms to consume the news. Approximately a fifth of Americans say that they prefer news websites and news apps, at 21% when looking to get up to speed on the news of the day and happenings around the world, while 14% rely on things such as social media. 10% prefer searches, and 6% rely on news-related podcasts to stay in the loop. And rounding things out, 3% of Americans say that they prefer news-related newsletters to get the newsy information that they crave. Not to be outdone, AI and chatbots seem to be one of the less reliable sources that Americans rely on to get their news, with only about fewer than 1% saying that they rely on this method. With all of this information as a backdrop, I have a particular question I'd like to pose to all of you. What would happen if the best parts of social media and legacy news had a baby? I believe the best person equipped to answer that question is my friend Jack Brewster. He's the founder and CEO of Newsreel, an interactive news app designed for attention spans in the digital age. Brewster's a former journalist for Forbes and NewsGuard and a Fulbright researcher on how the internet is rewiring our brains. Brewster's on a mission to make the news more engaging, simple, and impossible to ignore. And he joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShane. Let's have this conversation. So, Jack, I want to first welcome you to the program on this Thursday, my friend, and I'm super excited to learn about Newsreel. Thanks for a few minutes and for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
I'm really excited to be here, Kevin, and to take your questions. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. So, Jack, first and foremost, I wanted your honest and authentic opinion on the state of news today because, you know, we live in silos, my friend. Depending on what side of the aisle you're on is what news channel you turn on today, my friend. So, before we dive into Newsreel, I'm wondering your opinion about the state of news and how we cover news today, my friend.
Yeah, the state of news is not strong right now. I also think like the definition even has changed, right? About like what news even is anymore, and it's harder and harder to know that. I would say that it's not good, and part of that reason is because we've completely separated the connection that journalists once had with their readers, and so everything now is filtered through algorithms, and those algorithms are not doing a great job at surfacing the best kinds of news that I think democracy requires. And so I think there's a lot of great news being produced, and a lot of journalists that are doing phenomenal work, and a lot of creators that are doing phenomenal work. But the problem continues to be, is that going to reach people who want to actually consume high quality information? Because right now, there's a lot of sludge and toxic information in the way. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you brought up something that piqued my interest. So I want to follow up by asking you about the state of democracy,
Mm.
misinformation, and the role that news plays in today's society. Because I think misinformation is a big part of why democracy, at least in America, has eroded a little
Yeah.
bit. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that as well, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, the democracy requires an informed republic. I think that's always been a truth, and the success and failure of democracies has always relied on that truth. And I think right now we're in this moment where it's harder and harder to agree on a certain set of truths. Like there's always been, to quote Kellyanne Conway, like alternative facts, but we've had less of a selection of facts to agree on. And right now, it's really, really hard to have democracy function because the people are seeing such different realities. And when they are seeing those different realities, that social cohesion is much harder to facilitate. And so I really think that's one of the main drivers of why we are seeing the sort of erosion of democracies across the globe is because the ability for people to agree on a certain set of truths has really become that much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Jack, I'm also fascinated to learn about Newsreel, my friend. You stepped out and created a news app that was
Yep.
created for the interaction and the digital age, my friend. So tell me all about a Newsreel and why you were so inspired to create it, my friend.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're in this moment right now where social media doesn't really feel social, and we're at the same time we're using it to understand the world around us. That's our source of news, right? The This podcast will get put onto a set of platforms that people will use to consume, this information, and they may even think of it as news, but the social media has changed so profoundly where now we really have no idea where a lot of the information that we're consuming is coming from. On TikTok, a lot of it now is increasingly AI slop. And so I think if we want to use these platforms to get our news, we're going to have some kind of way, some alternative that feels still very familiar to us, but doesn't have so much like slop and other misinformation and sensationalism in the way. And so what Newsreel is it's not a news app, it's not a social media app, it's something in between. It helps people who want to start a news habit, who want to understand the world around them in just a few minutes every day. They want the experience to be just as engaging as social media, but without all of the toxicity. And so what Newsreel does is it presents news in formats that we're used to. It's swipeable, it's digestible, it has videos and infographics, and you can connect with your friends. At the same time, most of the content is produced by a set of journalists, all staffed by Newsreel. And so while it does have less of an ability for people to post whatever they want, they can interact with that content in similar ways. They can comment on it. They can ask their friend's opinion on it. They can see how their views are changing over time. So it feels like if almost like if a news app and a social media app had a baby. That's what Newsreel is.
Hey, it's a very creative analogy, my friend, and I tell you, I was impressed with coming up with such a creative marketing spin, my friend. So, congratulations, by the way, on the success of the app, my friend.
Thank you so much. No, yeah, it took me a while to get that analogy right.
As I'm anything worth having takes a couple of nights sleeps, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly.
Absolutely, my friend. And Brewster says that for over a decade, he's been fascinated by one specific question. What if the way we consume news is not just broken, but it's designed to fail us? I asked this former Forbes journalist and Fulbright researcher to tell me why he's been intrigued to find out an answer to that very question.
Yeah, so I mean, I am biased in a certain way, right? I come from a family of journalists. My parents met at Time Magazine back in the 80s. So I am biased in a way. Like I do believe that there is a value in what journalists offer, and I just don't think we've, one, done a good enough job of advocating for that, explaining to people why authoritative, fact-based news is important. And at the second, on the second hand, or secondly, I think as I said at the beginning of this podcast, we've separated like the actual news produced by journalists from the end reader because of just of what social media platforms are now doing. And so I'm obsessed with this question because I still think there's a value to what journalists are offering. And I think that's kind of a revolutionary idea now in 2025, especially among Gen Z. But I do believe that there's a space for authoritative, fact-based, neutral news. I just think we need to do a better job of delivering it to people. I think we need to make it more fun. I think we need to make it more engaging. I think we need to take some of the lessons of what social media platforms have offered and just apply it to high quality journalism.
Yeah, and to that point, Jack, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. You know, the American Psychological Association tells me that the median attention span for the average American today is 40 seconds or less, my friend, and they want usable bites of information. So I'm sure you're not surprised by that finding, but I'm curious, what do you think when you hear that statistic, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why I started Newsreel. I mean, I grew up with really, bad ADHD as well, so it's personal to me. I think that our phones definitely make it harder to focus. At the same time, I don't think telling people to go read long form journalism, to open up a website, to even read a book in some instances is possible for people all the time now, and that's because the state of how we communicate has changed. And so, it definitely depresses me. At the same time, with Newsreel, I think I'm accepting this reality in some ways, right? I'm saying this is not gonna, I can't change people's attention spans overnight. What I can do is offer something that's a little bit better than what they're getting, which is their TikTok feed. That this is a better return on their investment when it comes to their time, and it feels like it's still like fun and that they want to do it. I think that's the sort of power of what Newsreel is offering. But to go back to your question, it's depressing. I hope that we can improve that, and I hope that we've reached bottom, so to speak, and now there's time to improve that as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, I also wanted to talk to you about journalistic integrity. I'm sure that you saw a couple of weeks ago that the Pentagon instituted a new strategy only allowing
Mhm.
journalists to cover the stuff that they approved, and a bunch of major outlets didn't want to
Yeah.
sign the pledge. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that development and what you think about how journalists can fairly give information in today's political
Yeah.
climate, considering the climate that we're living in. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's partisan to say that that press access is extremely important, and that we all can agree that journalists of all stripes, of all kinds, should be allowed access to government agencies. And so I stand with everybody that has been excluded from the Pentagon. I think that what they're demanding is amounts to censorship, and is really bad for our democracy and every single American citizen, because it sets a standard that will impact administrations of both Democrat and Republican agencies. So I am profoundly disappointed by it, and I think that we all should stand up for access to all kinds of journalists. I think there's a reason why both CNN and Fox News agree that these requirements are not fair to journalists and need to be taken away. So to answer the second part of your question, I don't think the a role of a journalist needs to change in this kind of climate, but I do think that we need to do a better job at advocating for why we're needed and why we do what we do. I don't think people understand the value of authoritative, fact-based journalism, maybe in the way that they should, and I think we've really gotten away from the sort of layout of a newspaper. So when people write commentary or op-eds or editorial board opinions, people don't really know what that means, and we need to do a better job of explaining them. What's a unnamed source, and why are we using it? I think that those things need to be explained to readers more.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, I'm also curious to ask you about how journalists can use social media as a tool of
Mhm.
integrity and also information, because with the role of independent media, which I'll ask you about in a minute, but I'm also
Yeah.
curious to ask you about how we can mold social media and integrity as journalists. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think influencers and creators are journalists and should be considered as such. And if we do that, then we'll all sort of start to try and live up to the standards of what being a journalist means. I think the same rules apply. So if I'm an influencer or creator, and I'm consistently talking about different fashion, and let's say I'm reporting on fashion, and I start to take money from a fashion brand, I need to disclose that as marketing, and not blur the line between news and marketing. And I think that is a major standard that journalists follow that creators are not. And I think that we need to hold creators and influencers accountable, especially for treating them like journalists, which they are. Um, on the flip side, I think journalists need to do a better job of making their news more accessible for the next generation. And not even just people in general. I think we love as journalists to sort of just do our reporting and then think that the job is done. That we're not in that. that reality anymore. We don't live in that world where you can do that. You have to be able to understand that the most important reader in 2025 is the algorithm, not your reader. The algorithm decides what goes out to your readers, and we have to be able to craft our stories without dumbing them down, without making them more sensationalized, but that still can go viral and reach the people that we want to reach. It's just that's the world that we live in. So, with Newsreel, yes, I'm starting a new company, a new app that's separate from the algorithm. I still need to be able to explain to the algorithm why Newsreel is important because that's how I'm going to get new people to join our mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jack, I'm also curious to know your thoughts on the notion whether you think traditional media is broken and whether you think we can ever get back to objective reporting of the news. What are your thoughts there?
I do think, I mean, the media is a really big, huge tent, right? There's many different kinds, and when people say mainstream media, like I always ask them, like, who are you talking about? What outlets are you talking about? Because it's so big. But no, I do think elements of it are broken. The business model is failing. I think people have lost all sorts of trust in the mainstream media, and that is a huge problem, right? I think the way to fix it is some of what I've already talked about. Is it's advocating for why we need journalists. It's also not following the sort of like pitfalls that I think can seem very like appetizing in 2025, which is like, if you go work for a news outlet now, like you are in some places being asked to write articles for Google and Facebook's algorithm so that they can go viral there in sometimes for the wrong reasons, right? Like this is the rise of clickbait and the like, and I don't think that's what we should be pushing for. So it's a huge question, but I think the most important thing to remember as a journalist in 2025 is that you have to be able to craft your message responsibly for many different kinds of platforms, and still at the same time adhere to your principles, which is hard.
Absolutely. And, I wonder, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious to ask your opinion about the role and benefit of giving news interactively and more broadly the advancement of independent journalists and how
Mhm.
they're using social media to broaden the way that we deliver and consume news. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, two different questions. The first one, I mean, Newsreel is delivering news interactively because I think it offers something that no other news outlet is providing right now, and that's the ability to sort of like see how your views are changing, to also be forced to think critically, and that's really lacking in today's information landscape. You're mostly a passive consumer, right, with almost every single platform and news site. On Newsreel, you're asked your opinion, you're asked to give your emotional reaction, you're asked to answer a quiz question that's relating to the story. I think that is very important in 2025 to be forced to think critically, especially with AI. So that's why we've built Newsreel the way that we have. I'm trying to remember the second question that you had now. What was it?
Yeah, I was just curious about the role of independent journalists and how they're
Yeah.
changing the landscape of the profession.
Well, the good thing in 2025 is that anyone can be a journalist, and the bad thing in 2025 is that anyone can be a journalist.
Hmm.
So like I think there's two sides to it. I think it's wonderful that more people can participate, and I love many independent journalists that are not tied to a particular entity. The issue that we run into is that if you're working independently, oftentimes you don't have an editor, right? And when you don't have an editor, like who are you writing for? And often you're writing for the algorithm, right? You're looking to try and make it go viral and reach as many people as you can. And that's necessary for survival. I just think that you have to be able to do that and still, to the best of your ability, if you're acting as a journalist, an independent one, follow the same principles that a journalist working for a news outlet follows. I think it's still really, really important. And that includes some of the things that I mentioned, right? Like if you're writing about fashion and you're taking money on the side from a fashion brand or skincare company, you need to disclose that, and that is not something that a principle that I think a lot of influencers and creators are following.
Yeah, and Jack, I'm also wondering your thoughts on how opinion journalism is different from traditional journalism, because I think those lines can get blurred in today's journalistic sort of society, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you, how important do you think it is that we
Mhm.
separate opinion from traditional journalism as much as we can?
Yeah, I still think it's important. I may be a dinosaur on that front. I think um, no news outlet is completely objective. There's no really such thing as completely objective journalism. But there is a strong effort to do so. And I think that that's a system and a product that we all should still fight for. And I think it's important. There's always going to be a certain level of bias that's added to what a journalist is producing, even if they work for the most nonpartisan, straightforward news outlet in the world. But at least it's something that people can go to and feel like they're not getting a spin, and so there's value on the flip side to commentary. I think the thing I always tell people is that you need to have a diverse media diet, and if a diet includes having sources that are more nonpartisan, but it also means consuming different kinds of commentary. And I just feel like if you get the only kind of news that you're getting is TikTok news, right? You're not getting a good diet. Like that would be equivalent of just kind of eating um, candy all day, right?
Mhm.
But if you're consuming TikTok, news, which I do, you're looking at Instagram, but you're also reading different Substacks. You're listening to Kevin to your podcast. You're reading the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and like really like good quality writing as well. I think is important. You're going to come away with a much better understanding of the world than someone who just consumes one kind of media.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, as you know from watching my podcast, but I was born with a disability. When I
Hmm.
graduated college, Jack, I was rejected by 10 consecutive news directors, buddy. And it
Mm.
took me 6.5 years out of college before I got my first paying
Hmm.
journalism job, because no newsroom would hire me because they were
Hmm.
concerned about my disability as a liability,
Hmm.
my friend. So I'm curious, how do you think we can open more doors for
Hmm.
disabled journalists to break into the profession? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
It's a wonderful question. I mean, yeah, that is something that always needs to be discussed. I think not only people with disabilities, but also members of the LGBTQ community, people of color have traditionally been excluded from mainstream media publications, and I think it's really quite a shame because the job of a journalist and a news organization is to report stories from all different elements of society, all different parts of society. And so, there's definitely no one size fits all solution to the problem that you just laid out. But what I would say to any news outlet that is, refusing to hire you, they're doing a disservice because they're losing a perspective on how to cover the community that is extremely important. There's tons of stories to be told about people with your condition and other conditions as well. And if those are not going to be told by if you just have a sort of one size fits all type of reporter that you're hiring. So, I wish I had a better solution than that, but that's the first thing I would say is that diversity is such an asset when it comes to reporting on different communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, if I gave you an audience of 1,000 first-time journalists who were just
Hmm.
graduating and wanting to go into the digital news space, because you're someone who believes that the internet is sort of rewriting our brains and the way that
Yeah.
we consume news and the rest. So I'm wondering your thoughts on two questions, because I know, my friend, that you're on a mission to make news more
Hmm.
engaging and simpler. So two questions. I'm curious, what do you think good journalists, in terms of qualities they possess, have today? And what would be your message to protect rather objectivity and be a good journalist if you're first starting out? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
So I think it's a great question. I think first I would say you need to be multi-platform. You need to have the ability to write first and foremost, because writing is thinking, but also the ability to adapt that content for many different kinds of platforms. I think really good journalists now are able to write and report, track down sources, conduct investigations, but they also have a grasp of how information moves online. They are just like absolutely determined to get their story out there. So they have to be able to not only like write, but also, be able to speak clearly and form, complete sentences when talking, and also be able to be good at editing and be good at many different kinds of things. So that's the first piece of advice that I give to journalists. Like first and foremost, learn how to write, but second, you need to be able to adapt that content for many different types of platforms so that it can reach people. It'll make you much, much more likely to get hired. And it'll show that you understand the sort of landscape that we live in today. What do I say to people that want to be an objective journalist? Well, I would say first that there's no such thing and that you can't be perfect, and that both sides journalism is also not the solution to objectivity. I believe that the best journalists are one that really grasp nuance first and foremost, that they understand that there's many different layers to the story, and that just putting a Republican's point of view and a Democrat's point of view is not what objective journalism is. I think objective journalism, if there is such a thing, it's being able to stack layers of nuance into an article artfully, and to do it without coming across like you're just throwing a bunch of mush together. I think being able to do that is really the testament to a good journalist.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the creation of Newsreel, my next question may not surprise you, Jack, but according to a 2025 Pew Research poll, my friend, it found that 50% of young people and the Gen Z population rely on online sources and news apps to get their news today. So I'm curious about your thoughts on those findings, and how do you think young people can consume news today, my friends, and how it sort of affects the decisions that they make, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'm not naive. I know most people get their news from TikTok and social media in general. I mean, I'm one of them too. I get a lot of my news from there, from even still from X, and I haven't sort of switched over to any other platform. I still use it a lot. So I'm not naive. I am part of that. As I said, I go back to it. I think like being able to have a diverse diet is really important when it comes to consuming media. And I think second, like uh, that you should know the sources where you're getting your news from. So if you're
Mhm.
seeing somebody that consistently pops up on your algorithm, like do some due diligence about who they are, where did they come from, who are they? Are they getting any funding from any particular organizations? Those are really important things because they can really skew your view of the world. And so, that's why partially why I created Newsreel, right? Is because I felt like people didn't have the time to do that, nor do they have the time to go read long form journalism. And so, what can we offer them that's in between? Something that feels like social media, but is much higher quality, right? It has the sort of the engagement, the interactivity of a social media platform, but without all the toxic sludge. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm trying to respond to exactly what you said in that Pew study that you referenced. I
Mhm.
think that we need to advocate for new communities online, and Newsreel is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jack, I'm also curious to get your opinion on the political news of the day and
Hmm.
the shutdown in America, my friend. And
Yep.
from a news perspective, what fascinates you about covering the government shutdown? And then more broadly, how do you think the coverage of political news in the States specifically has evolved, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think the most important stories that should continue to be told are the shutdowns to the sort of the services related to like food stamps and the like running out. I mean, like food aid is really impacts millions and millions of people, and those things are really the things that we need to be watching. Like when those checks stop flowing, how is it going to impact millions of Americans? Those are the stories I think that need to be told. I care less about the sort of horse race politics and like how Democrats and Republicans are like arguing with one another. I think those really like the human stories and the ones that need to be told more frequently. Um, the second question was about the coverage of just politics more broadly, correct?
In
Yeah.
general, yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think, Trump is such a unique figure in that he's just a one-man news machine. And what I worry about is people becoming overloaded with everything that's going on and just tuning out entirely. And so, as a journalist, I think, context really matters when it comes to the stories that you're reporting on Trump and the White House in general because people you can't just write whatever Trump is doing, even if it's extremely newsworthy. You have to put it in context because otherwise you're just no better than a stenographer, right? You're just writing whatever happened. And the real, testament to a good journalist is one, can you highlight what's important, and two, put it into context. And those are the first two responsibilities of a journalist. And I think a lot of times, like we lose that in today's world.
Yeah, Jack, I could talk to you for 2 more hours, my friend, but I will. I'll end. I'll end with this. I'm curious to ask you about what brings you the most hope about the current state of media, my friend. And
Mm.
when you look at your own professional or personal legacy, how do you want that to be defined, my friend?
Wow, good questions for almost 2 o'clock on a Thursday. And this has been a wonderful conversation, Kevin. Thank you. So I mean, what I have hope for is like all the um, young people, much younger than me. I'm 29. I'm not even a young person anymore. Have become so excited by Newsreel, because I think of it as a movement, and I think of it as something that they will only succeed if young people can get behind and join in. And there have been so many people, ages 12 to 29, my age, who have really like resonated with the mission that we're trying to achieve. And so that gives me a ton of hope. My legacy, like I really hope it's that I'm able to push like really like high quality news forward for the next generation. Like I want to be able to help people have better conversations, learn and think more critically in an age where it just feels harder and harder to do that. That's what I want to be known for, if anything, and I hope Newsreel plays a part in that.
Yeah, and just very quickly, I have one other question that I'm fascinated to get your answer on, and that is this, Jack. What do you think is the difference between an influencer and a journalist? What do you think is the distinctive factor between the two?
Well, it's a great question. I kind of talked about it earlier. I think a lot of influencers are journalists. They're just not. Some may not be like the most um, uh, responsible journalists. Like, so I think all influencers are journalists. Some are not living up to the sort of full meaning of what it actually what actually constitutes a journalist. So most influencers I think of as being social media first. They are looking to increase their platform and get increase their reach, and may comment on one particular issue, but may comment on a lot of them. But that is still journalism. If you're talking about the world, sorry, you're a journalist, whether you like it or not. I think unfortunately, what's happened is that a lot of influencers, as I said, kind of blur the line between marketer, and journalist, and
Mm-hmm.
that becomes an issue, right? Even if you're an opinion journalist, if you're not disclosing to your audience when you're advocating for a product that you're being paid for, and when you're not, that is deceptive, and you are part of the problem. And so there's a lot of influencers that are doing that, and that I think is the issue. I think also if you're a journalist, you're less interested in traffic and more in am I telling a good story, and will my editor like it? And I think more influencers need to think about that when they're reporting on something. That, like, yes, it's great if you get a ton of views, but what is it worth in the sort of grand scheme of things? Are you really helping people, or are you just making more money because the algorithm is rewarding you with views? I hope that more influencers think like that, and I think there's a huge opportunity for both journalists, creators, and influencers to work together. They just need to talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with Newsroom, what's the best way they can do that, my friend?
You can go to our site newsreel.co, not com, and sign up to or download it. There's just a button at the top that says sign up for free or start for free, and you can try it out right away. So I hope all your listeners will do that.
Fantastic. Well, Jack, as a journalist at heart, my friend, I'm very interested in protecting the integrity of the profession, and this was a wide-ranging conversation that covered a
Yeah.
lot of topics, my friend. So I want to thank you for the privilege of answering my questions and for joining me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
This has been wonderful, Kevin. Thank you. I really have enjoyed this conversation.